In today's video, we're going to continue our NHL Season Preview series for the 2018-19 upcoming season. Today's team we're discussing is the Edmonton Oilers, and that's coming up next. Hey everyone, and welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. If you're new to the channel, thanks for stopping by. We review and discuss all 31 NHL teams, so if you're a huge hockey fan, consider subscribing and clicking the bell so you don't miss anything. So as I mentioned off the top, today we're covering the Edmonton Oilers season preview for the upcoming 18-19 season. If you haven't caught any of our prior videos in this series, we're basically doing it into 4 segments. The first segment, we're going to recap the 17-18 season, deep dive into their team statistics and see how things went. In the second segment, which we call additions and subtractions, we're going to review the roster from last year compared to this year, see who's gone and who's new to the team. In the third segment, we're going to look at the projected lineup that they're likely to put on the ice for opening night. And in the last segment, we're going to take a look at what they're likely going to accomplish and give you my thoughts and predictions for the upcoming season. Before we jump in as well, I just want to remind you, in case you haven't already done so, if you'd like to grab one of these great Top Shelf Hockey t-shirts, there's a link down below in the description to our merchandise store. I'd greatly appreciate it if you check that out and considering buying some of the Top Shelf Hockey merchandise to help support the channel. But let's jump in here and take a look at the 17-18 season results here for the Edmonton Oilers. Obviously, as we know, last year was not a great season for the Edmonton Oilers. The year prior, they had a much better result, ended up going to the second round of the playoffs. They had really high expectations during the 17-18 season, but failed to live up to it and follow up on their successful campaign of the 16-17 season. They finished with a record of 36 wins, 40 losses, and 6 overtime losses for 78 points out of the playoffs, finishing in 6th place in the Pacific Division. Even though this team is really high-powered with some offensive weapons like Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl, they only put up 229 goals, which put them 20th best at the NHL. Now, combining that with the fact that they allowed 262 goals against, which gives them a goal differential of -33, that is not a great result, and certainly not good enough to be a playoff team last year. Now let's jump over here and take a look at special teams. Now you'd think with all the offensive firepower they could put on a power play that they'd have a much better result, but in fact they were the absolute worst last year, finishing 31st with a power play percentage of only 14.8. That is simply not good enough, and they certainly need to improve on that to have a chance to really improve their overall standing results here for the upcoming year. Now, taking a look at the penalty kill, it wasn't a whole lot better. They finished with a percentage of 76.7, put them in 25th in the league. So really, when you're in the bottom half of the league and you're actually near the bottom 5 or 6 teams when it comes to power play, penalty kill, goals for, goals against, it's just an absolute recipe for a disaster. I guess a lot of fans for the Oilers are probably hoping that last year was a bit of an anomaly and then they can kind of bounce back and perform a lot closer to the levels they did the year before. Now let's jump over here and take a look at the scoring breakdown by period. I like to do this because it shows us how they start, how they finish, and how they do in that middle second period as well. Kind of allows us to see where there might be some breakdowns here as this team moves forward throughout each game. They were outscored by their opponents by a score of 75-65 in first periods last year, so more often than not after one period of play, they were behind the 8 ball and trailing. Second periods weren't a whole lot better, where they were outscored 89-76. So again, you know, they need to be able to outscore their opponents at some point in juncture in the game here that make it close. And in the third period, they were outscored by a margin of 93-81. So there was not one single period or part of the game where they were able to kind of outperform their opponents and kind of give themselves more of a chance to win, which is really unfortunate. Obviously, they weren't having great starts, they weren't having great finishes, and even in the middle frame wasn't a whole lot better either. The overtime period wasn't as bad for the Oilers. They did score 7 times in OT, gave up 5 goals. So obviously, they only had 6 overtime losses on the year. So that part of the game, when they got it there, obviously wasn't too bad, especially when you get to the 3-on-3. When you have guys like McDavid and Draisaitl you can put out there, that certainly gives them a great advantage for sure over a lot of teams. So they were able to take advantage of some of those situations, but just was far often not enough to really make a big difference on the season. When the Oilers did score the first goal of the game, they didn't have too bad of a record. They finished with a record of 22-11-4. So obviously scoring first was important for this team. It just didn't happen far often enough. The Oilers also showed last year that after 1 period of play or 2 periods of play, if they were trailing, they didn't have much of an ability to come back. When they were down after the first period, they had a record of 1-18-5. After 2 periods of play, if they were trailing, they only had a record of 2-21-1. So obviously, more often than not, they get down early. The comeback just never seemed to happen. Obviously, Connor McDavid had a fantastic year, putting up over 100 points, winning the Art Ross Trophy. Obviously, certainly worthy of being the top player in the world still at this point in time. But they certainly need to do some work to build around McDavid to make this team a little bit more balanced so they can have more success. I mean, you saw in the second half of the year, Connor McDavid was probably frustrated that as much as he was playing well and setting up a lot of his teammates, they weren't able to finish and put the puck in the net nearly often enough. So he took it upon himself to become more of a goal scorer and do a little bit more of a one-man show, to be a little bit more selfish with the puck, which allowed him to score more goals and increase his stats. Unfortunately, this wasn't quite enough to get the team much further ahead. And we've seen reports during this offseason here that McDavid has indicated he's working on becoming a little bit more of a goal scorer, not just a playmaker. Obviously, he scored around 40 goals last year, so he can certainly put the puck in the net. There's no doubt about it. But if he's scoring that many goals without making it one of his primary focuses, you can only imagine what he can do if he's really working extra hard to improve that area of his game. Now let's jump over here to the second segment and take a look at the additions and subtractions from the last year's roster compared to this year's roster. There has been a fair bit of change with this Oilers team year over year. Now let's jump in here and take a look at the new players to the team. First of all, they're going to have a new backup goalie this year. They're going to have Mikko Koskinen, who came over from overseas. Obviously, last year's backup goalie, Laurent Brossoit, didn't really work out. I mean, I know they also have Al Montoya in the organization as well, but Koskinen should hopefully give Talbot a little bit more of a solid backup and to allow them to play the appropriate amount of games. Obviously, Cam Talbot needs to bounce back this year as well, but hopefully Koskinen will be a much better, more solid, reliable backup for the Oilers this season, especially in those back-to-back games. They can feel more confident in their second goalie going in between the pipes. Now, they've also added winger Tobias Rieder. Obviously, Rieder's also of German descent. I do fully expect him to have an opportunity to play with Leon Draisaitl. They've had opportunities to play together before during international competitions, playing for Team Germany, and they certainly did have a fair bit of chemistry and worked well together. So I would fully imagine that was one of the main reasons he was signed this offseason. Obviously, he was mainly played with the Arizona Coyotes before, was traded to the Kings at the deadline last year, was not given a qualifying offer, was not re-signed by the Kings, so they became a free agent, and now is a member of the Edmonton Oilers. So I suspect he'll have that opportunity to play with Leon and see if they can create some magic there on that second line. They also brought in Kyle Brodziak, who's likely going to be their fourth line center for the Oilers as well. Obviously, he's got a fair bit of NHL games under his belt now, so that should provide a little bit more experience on the bottom six as well. Now, as I mentioned before, for the subtractions for the guys who are no longer with this team, who played last year, you can throw Mike Camilleri into the mix, who came over via trade partway through the season. He's not returned. He's not playing anywhere in the NHL as of right now. Obviously, Pakarinen is no longer with the team as well. I believe he's playing over in Europe. They did buy out defenseman Eric Gryba, so Gryba's not returning, as well as defenseman Mark Fane has not returned as well. And of course, I'd already mentioned that the former backup goalie, Laurent Brossoit, is no longer with the team. He's now with the Winnipeg Jets. So now let's jump over here and take a look at their projected lineup come opening night. Obviously, between the pipes, you're going to have goaltender Cam Talbot, backup Mikko Koskinen. Obviously, Talbot really needs to have a bounce-back season. He proved the year before that he can be a really solid starting goaltender at the NHL. Obviously, after having a chance to be a backup for a number of years and providing some solid results, obviously came over to Edmonton and really had a pretty good start to his career with the Oilers. But last year certainly was not his year at all. He needs to play better for this team to move forward. He's a major part of their success from the year prior. Now, obviously, on defense, there are some holes, and obviously they are going to be starting the year without Sekera. He's going to be on injury reserve and be on that for some time. Likely going to be into the new year sometime before Sekera can rejoin this team and get into some NHL action. So filling out the Oilers blue line on opening night, in your top two pairs, you're going to have some experienced guys like Oscar Klefbom, Adam Larsson, as well as Chris Russell. Now, at this point, it is debatable if Darnell Nurse will be there, as he is still unsigned without a contract, and he has indicated if he's not signed by the time training camp opens that he will sit out. At this point in time, it is a little bit unclear if Nurse will be in the lineup on opening night or not. Obviously, that contract needs to have an agreement in place here for that to happen and have Nurse in the lineup. But at this point in time, I fully suspect that that likely is going to happen. Obviously, your bottom few spots are going to be, guys like Benning and Bear and Bouchard. Obviously, Bear and Bouchard are youngsters, but I do fully suspect they will get an opportunity. It's not really clear at this point in time if Evan Bouchard will be with the roster for the whole year, but I would not be surprised if he at least got a sample of games early in the season for them to make that decision if he's going to stick with the club or head back for one more year junior with the London Knights. Either way, this Oilers blue line is not in the greatest shape. Obviously, the injury to Sekera doesn't help. But obviously, at this point in time, with the way they played last year, I do have some concerns over the blue line for the Edmonton Oilers. But hopefully their main thing that they need to hope for here is that their youngsters, if they have an opportunity here like Barron Bouchard, that they can play well and really help move this team forward. I really think Evan Bouchard, when he's given the opportunity, whether it be this year or next, that he could very well be their main power play quarterback. And if you throw in Bouchard on the first power play, you maybe have Clefbaum on the second power play, and that would really help the offense move forward here with the power play opportunities. Obviously, that was a major area of struggle last year. They can have a good defenseman to be that quarterback that'll probably go a long way in helping it improve. Obviously, when you take a look at the forward group, there's no doubt your number one center is obviously going to be Connor McDavid. I fully suspect Ryan Nugent-Hopkins will line up next to him on the left side. Your right winger for that top line, it could very well be Keiler Yamamoto, who's another rookie who could have an impact on this team. They very well may also give the opportunity to right winger Ty Rattie. Obviously, Rattie had a chance to play with those guys towards the end of the year and actually was putting up some pretty decent numbers. So I will be curious to see if the coaching staff decides to continue with that experiment and give him another opportunity. I do think longer term, though, that Yamamoto might very well be a good winger for McDavid long term. But I guess we'll see how things go in preseason here in training camp and see what the coaching staff decides upon. Your second line, I do fully suspect, obviously, Leon Draisaitl will be that number 2 center. And I do think he'll be given an opportunity to play with fellow German Tobias Rieder. I would imagine on the other side, we're going to have another player who needs to have a bounce-back season, and that's left winger Milan Lucic. Now, obviously, Lucic had, from what I've heard, a pretty good offseason here and is really raring to come back and try to bounce back here. So hopefully he can do that for the Oilers based on what he's getting paid. He needs to be more productive. Right now, that contract with Lucic and the Oilers is not looking real good. So hopefully he can have a more productive 18-19 season. Your third line center more than likely ends up being Ryan Strome. Obviously, his wingers very well could be Jesse Puljujarvi and Drake Caggiula. Now, Puljujarvi is also another player who could potentially audition for McDavid's right side. I'm not really sure that he's cut out for that just yet, but he's another right winger who could potentially have an opportunity there as well between Rattie and Yamamoto as well. So obviously they do have some different interchangeable parts there who could play with McDavid or Draisaitl or Strome. So we'll see depending on how they play, and as they juggle their lines, they very well could all see action on different lines throughout the year, but I would imagine this is kind of how I envision it to start on opening night. Your fourth line center more than likely is going to be Kyle Brodziak. Obviously, I would imagine your wingers likely could be Kara and possibly Cassian. Don't forget there's Pontus Aberg in there as well. He didn't do too bad towards the end of the year. I'm not sure if Zach Cassian really fits with this team long term, in my opinion. If I were the coaching staff, I may very well give the opportunity to a player like a Pontus Aberg. And Cassian might be that extra forward and not playing regularly throughout the season, depending on how things go. Part of that as well will also be determined if they decide to keep Yamamoto with the roster or not. Obviously, he's still eligible to play junior, so it's not a foregone conclusion he makes his team, although I do think he is NHL ready in my opinion. So now let's jump over here to the final segment where I kind of give you my thoughts and predictions on how the Oilers are going to fare this year. I do think it's quite possible we could see an improved result compared to last year. If you watch my prediction series on the standings for each division posted here in the past week or two, you'll notice in the Pacific Division, I did have the Oilers labeled for 5th place. Now, the only reason I have that is there's just so many question marks and players who need to bounce back to move this team forward. It's hard to have confidence that they're all going to be able to get it done. Obviously, you have top guys like McDavid and Draisaitl, and even Nugent-Hopkins has played much better as a winger for McDavid. There's certainly some question marks on the blue line, especially with Darnell Nurse yet to be signed. You need guys like Cam Talbot and Milan Lucic to bounce back. You need some youngsters to really step in and play well as well. So there's just a lot of things that need to go just the right way, I think, for the Oilers to really drastically improve and get back to the playoffs. I do think it's certainly a possibility here that they could prove me wrong and get themselves more into a wild card playoff position. However, like I said, the main reason I have them pegged where I do, there's just so many question marks and so many players that need to bounce back. It's hard to have confidence that they're all going to get it done and really move this team more forward than I have them moving here during the 18-19 season. So I'd love to hear your comments down below. What do you expect the Oilers to accomplish this coming season? Obviously, they did make a fair bit of change, but they still have some question marks. They obviously have the Sekera injury to deal with. They have Nurse that's unsigned. All these players to bounce back. I want to know what you think what the Oilers are going to accomplish here for the 18-19 season. Now, if you're new to the channel here, I hope you consider subscribing. We cover all 31 NHL teams, and there's plenty of content here for all hockey fans to enjoy. So if you're new, hit that subscribe button. If you like this video, don't forget to hit the like button as well. I'd appreciate it if you did. As always, thank you very much for watching, everybody. We will catch you next time.